The rain came down in sheets against the glass tower windows of Whitmore and Carrington Law, drowning out even the sound of city traffic far below. Inside, the conference room sat in sterile silence, broken only by the soft hum of the overhead lights and the slow ticking of a wall clock that seemed far too loud. Marianne Brooks sat at one end of the long, polished walnut table, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the single document laid out before her. A divorce decree, clean, final, cold. Across from her, Silas Whitmore leaned back in his chair, one ankle resting over the opposite knee, his tailored charcoal suit flawless, his expression unreadable. He looked like success incarnate, every inch of him sculpted by control, wealth, and distance. The kind of man who walked into boardrooms and made men nervous, who didn't flinch when millions were at stake. But now, when everything personal was on the line, he had nothing to say. The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly, glancing between them. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Brooks." Marianne didn't answer right away. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. The ink was dry. The terms already negotiated. There was nothing left to discuss, not the assets, not the gallery they'd once opened together, not the love that had slipped through the cracks of board meetings and long business trips. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled, just enough to make the motion feel unreal. The gold band on her finger glinted under the ceiling lights, and for a moment, she just stared at it. "Do you want a moment?" the lawyer asked gently. "No," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "I've already had 6 months of moments." Silas didn't move, didn't blink. His green eyes were fixed somewhere behind her, as if not seeing her made it easier. Marianne signed her name. The pen glided over the paper, etching the final cut of something that had once felt infinite. When she was done, she slid the papers forward without looking up. Silas leaned in and added his signature without hesitation, as if he were closing another property deal, as if this were just one more asset being liquidated. The lawyer stood. "We'll file this today. You'll both receive final copies within the week." Neither of them spoke. Marianne stood and walked to the door, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She could feel Silas behind her, a presence she had once known intimately, now just empty space. As she reached the hallway, the receptionist offered her a sympathetic smile. Marianne returned it with a polite nod, then turned and disappeared down the corridor. Inside the private restroom, she locked the stall behind her, dropped her purse to the floor, and let herself breathe, really breathe, for the first time that morning. The air was sharp, sterile, too clean. Her throat ached with restraint. She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled tissue. Inside it, wrapped like something forbidden, was a plastic stick with 2 pink lines. Positive. Marianne stared at it, the room spinning slowly around her. It was still fresh hours old. She had taken the test that morning, barely able to hold the wrapper steady. And now, just hours later, she was no longer anyone's wife. She had carried that knowledge with her through the legal meeting like a loaded secret. Silas didn't know. Would never know. Not now. Not when everything between them had dried up into silence. Her hand tightened around the test. They had tried, years ago. IVF, acupuncture, diets, medications, prayers, whispered under breath in dark rooms. Hope had worn them down. And now, when everything was shattered now, nature had decided to be cruel. Tears blurred her vision. She covered her mouth with her hand to keep the sound in. She sank down to the cold tile floor, heart pounding. "You don't get to cry," she told herself. "You walked into that room knowing exactly what you were doing, but the pain didn't care about logic. After a long moment, she stood, gathered herself, and walked to the trash bin. She stared at the test one last time, then, slowly, she tore it down the middle once, twice, 3 times, until the pieces were too small to recognize. They fluttered into the bin like the last shreds of hope. By the time she stepped back out into the hallway, her expression was blank, polished, perfect. She walked out into the wet Atlanta streets without an umbrella. The rain plastered her dark hair to her face, soaked through her coat. She didn't care. Let it pour. Let it wash everything away. Back at her apartment, the one she had moved into 2 months ago when things turned truly cold, she changed into dry clothes, pulled out a suitcase, and began to pack. There wasn't much, just what she had kept after moving out of the Midtown condo. A few dresses, her favorite boots, sketchbooks, photos she couldn't bring herself to throw away yet. She paused at one drawer. Inside, their wedding album lay buried under a stack of old receipts and art supplies. She pulled it out slowly, hands unsure. The cover was white leather, soft and worn. She opened it. The first page was a picture of them under magnolia trees, the Spanish moss hanging like lace from the branches. Her dress had been simple, classic. He had smiled at her like she was the only thing that existed. She closed it. Too fast. She placed it in the bottom of the box, face down, and sealed the lid shut. Savannah was calling. It wasn't a literal call, just a pull, deep in her chest, toward the only place that had ever felt like refuge. Her childhood home had long since been sold, but the city still held corners of her old self, the art walks, the quiet streets, the marshy air that clung to your skin and whispered, "Slow down." She booked a one-way train ticket that night. No plan, just escape. When the train pulled out the next morning, Marianne watched the Atlanta skyline disappear through a rain-slicked window, her hand resting gently over her stomach. A life was growing inside her, silent, invisible, waiting. She had no idea what the future looked like, but she knew one thing. She was going to protect this child from everything she hadn't been protected from, even if it meant doing it alone. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The train eased into Savannah just after noon, its horn echoing through the warm, misty air like a sigh of surrender. Marianne stepped off with a single worn suitcase, a rolled-up sketch pad, and the weight of a decision that felt both impossibly brave and quietly reckless. The southern humidity wrapped around her like a second skin. It wasn't the sharp, bustling rush of Atlanta. Here, time moved differently, slower, deeper, like the tide creeping into the marshes. Spanish moss hung from trees like old secrets, and the streets smelled faintly of earth and rain. She hadn't called anyone. No announcement, no dramatic return, just quiet escape. But someone had always known she'd come back. "About time you came home, sugar." The voice caught her before she saw the woman it belonged to. Marianne turned, blinking away the heat and memory, and found Cora Hayes standing beside her rusted blue pickup, arms crossed, white curls peeking from beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat. How did you? I know when my girls are hurting." Cora's gaze softened. "And I figured if I gave you enough space, you'd eventually remember Savannah still loves you." Marianne's throat tightened. She managed to whisper, "I didn't know where else to go. You came to the right place." The passenger door creaked as Marianne climbed in. Cora didn't ask questions, not yet. She just drove, humming something low and bluesy under her breath, the kind of tune that seemed older than the road itself. Cora's cottage was just off Jones Street, tucked behind a curtain of flowering dogwoods and a white picket fence that had seen better days. The front porch sagged slightly, the rocking chair creaked in the breeze, and every corner smelled faintly of lemon oil and old books. It felt like exhaling. "You can stay in the guest room," Cora said as she carried the suitcase inside. "Ain't nobody used it in years, but the bed still holds a soul." Marianne followed her in, eyes scanning the photos on the walls. Generations of smiles, faded graduation caps, men in military uniforms, women in Sunday hats. The past felt alive here. "Cora, I don't want to impose. I just needed—" "Hush now," Cora said, her voice soft but firm. "You're not imposing. You're healing. Big difference." That night, after unpacking just enough to feel like she wasn't drifting, Marianne sat on the back steps, a warm mug of tea in her hands. Crickets sang somewhere in the distance. Fireflies blinked like whispers in the dark. She pressed a hand against her belly. It still didn't feel real. "You ever gonna tell me what broke you?" Cora asked gently from behind her, settling onto the step with a slow groan. "Or am I just supposed to play detective?" Marianne stared straight ahead. "It's over, that's all. I saw the headlines, you know," Cora said, not unkindly. "You and Silas, the perfect couple. The art curator and the real estate king." Marianne's laugh came out brittle. "Perfect on paper. Paper don't know what happens behind closed doors." Silence stretched between them. "I thought love would be enough," Marianne finally whispered. "But I became invisible somewhere along the way. Every time he looked at his phone instead of me. Every time he missed a dinner, or brushed off something I said with next time. And then, when I found out, after everything, it just felt too late." Cora didn't ask what she found out. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached over and rested a hand on Marianne's shoulder. "Maybe he couldn't see you then. But I see you now. And that baby, that little heartbeat you're carrying, they will too." Marianne's eyes welled, but she nodded. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held space and breath and a kind of peace she hadn't felt in months. 2 weeks passed in a blur of quiet rhythms. Morning tea on the porch, freelance work from her laptop, long walks through Forsyth Park, where mothers pushed strollers and children chased pigeons with carefree abandon. Sometimes, she'd sit beneath the massive oaks, sketching the patterns of the moss or the curve of strangers' smiles. She'd picked up a small contract through Rebecca Lynn, an old acquaintance from college who now ran a boutique design studio downtown. Rebecca hadn't asked too many questions either, just welcomed her back like time hadn't passed at all. "You're not running," she'd said over coffee in a sunlit cafe on Broughton Street. "You're restarting. There's a difference." And yet, despite the quiet, despite the small shoots of something like stability beginning to break through the soil, Marianne still dreamed of him. Of Silas, of the way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated, of how his fingers brushed her wrist when he wanted her attention but didn't know how to ask, of the way he used to call her mare in the quiet moments, long before his empire needed every ounce of him. She hated that she missed him. One afternoon, as she sorted client proofs at the kitchen table, Cora breezed in with a newspaper tucked under her arm. "You see this?" she said, sliding it in front of Marianne. The Savannah Morning News headline stared back at her. "Whitmore Properties eyes historic Savannah mansion for renovation." Marianne's stomach dropped. "Silas. Here. He's coming?" Her voice barely registered above a whisper. "Looks like it," Cora replied, sipping her sweet tea. "You gonna be all right?" Marianne stared at the paper. She hadn't told him about the baby, about anything. He wouldn't recognize her now. wouldn't know the version of her that sat cross-legged in Cora's kitchen wearing paint-smeared sweats and a half-finished sketch pinned to the fridge. He probably hadn't even looked back. But deep down in that quiet, aching part of her, she hadn't dared to touch a seed of something stirred. Not hope, not yet, but a reckoning. She pressed a hand gently against her stomach and whispered, "We're not hiding forever." And somewhere, just a few streets away, a man in a tailored coat stepped out of a black car in front of a roped-off mansion on Gaston Street, unaware that his past was already breathing the same Savannah air. The first flutter came one afternoon, while Marianne was sorting design proofs in the sunlit corner of Cora's living room. A small movement, feather soft but undeniable, just beneath her ribs. She froze. The paper slid from her lap to the floor, forgotten. There it was again. A subtle tap from inside her belly, like a tiny hand knocking on the door. Her breath caught. It was happening. It was real. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Not from fear this time, or grief, or regret, but from something warmer. Something that felt like light cracking through the shell she'd built around herself. The baby was still so small, still a whisper of a life, but it was hers, fully, completely, a piece of her, of the love that had once made her believe in forever. She pressed both palms against her stomach, eyes brimming. "Hi," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're really in there." Cora appeared in the doorway a beat later, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. "You okay, sugar?" Marianne nodded, laughing softly through tears. It moved. The baby just moved. Cora's face broke into a smile that lit up every soft crease in her skin. She stepped forward, gentle as always, and knelt beside her, placing a hand on Marianne's belly. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice tender. "Not ever again." That night, Marianne lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above her. The baby's movements had stopped for now, but the memory of them clung to her like a secret melody. She tried not to think about Silas, but every milestone brought him back. His absence became louder with each kick, each appointment. Each night she spent sketching tiny faces in her notebook that might have had his eyes. She hadn't told him. Not because she wanted revenge, not because she didn't believe he had the right to know, but because when she looked back at the man, he'd become the one who no longer had time to make eye contact, who missed anniversaries without apology, who hadn't noticed her packing her things until she was gone. She saw a stranger. And strangers didn't get to know your baby. Still, as the weeks passed, her resolve wavered, especially after she saw the headline. Whitmore Properties was moving fast. Silas had already made 3 trips to Savannah in the past month. She hadn't seen him yet, not face to face, but she'd heard things. Through Rebecca, through Cora, through the buzz of a town that still whispered when big names passed through. And today, at Forsyth Park, she saw him. Not clearly just a flash through the trees, but it was him. He was standing near the playground, talking to someone in a navy blazer, laughing. Her heart lurched at the sound. She ducked behind a column near the cafe, breath shallow. Ellie kicked again. Marianne closed her eyes, fingers trembling over her belly. "He's here," she whispered. "He's really here." That night, she tossed in bed, haunted by the sound of his voice. It wasn't just that she'd seen him, it was how seeing him cracked something wide open inside her. She remembered the first time they danced. Savannah, 5 years ago. A charity gala under the stars. He'd pulled her onto the lawn barefoot, away from the music, and spun her in slow circles, while everyone else watched from behind champagne glasses. "You're the only person who ever made me forget I was supposed to be someone else," he had said. She had believed him. Now she wasn't sure if that man still existed. A week later, Rebecca invited her to brunch at a cafe just off River Street. The morning sun filtered through soft white curtains as Marianne sipped on lemon ginger tea and tried to act like her hands weren't shaking. "You okay?" Rebecca asked gently. Marianne nodded. "Just not sleeping well." "You know he's staying at the Whitmore house?" Rebecca said, eyeing her carefully. "He's been doing walkthroughs every morning." "I don't want to see him." "That's fine," Rebecca replied, folding her napkin. "But I think it's time you figured out what you do want." Marianne didn't respond. She couldn't, because the truth was, she didn't know anymore. That evening, the air turned heavy with the kind of humidity that made the trees look like they were sweating. Cora sat on the porch, shelling peas into a silver bowl, while a storm brewed in the distance. Marianne joined her, barefoot and tired. "Did you love him?" Cora asked without preamble. The question cut through the stillness like thunder. "Yes," Marianne said after a long moment. "God, yes. Then why didn't you tell him?" Marianne looked down at her hands. "Because I wanted him to fight for me first. For us. I wanted him to notice something was wrong before I had to spell it out." Cora nodded slowly. "But he didn't." "No. And now?" Marianne exhaled. "Now I don't know if I'm protecting this child or punishing him." Lightning flashed somewhere far off. Cora reached over and took her hand. "Sugar, there's a difference between keeping someone safe and keeping them out." The words sat with her through the night, long after the storm rolled in and painted the sky in streaks of electric blue. She stood by the window, watching rain trace the glass, and imagined Silas doing the same just a few blocks away. And for the first time in months, she whispered his name out loud. Silas, just to see if it still felt like something that belonged to her. The baby kicked again, harder this time, a heartbeat louder than memory. A signal that something was coming, and she wasn't ready, but she was listening. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The sun was barely up when Silas Whitmore stepped out of the black SUV and onto the cracked sidewalk in front of the old Waverly mansion. Morning fog hung low over the city, clinging to the iron fences and the moss-laced oaks like secrets. His polished shoes tapped against the pavement, slow and steady, as he adjusted the cuff of his jacket and took in the weathered estate before him. It was quiet here too, quiet for the weight he carried in his chest. "Place has good bones," said the project manager behind him, flipping through a clipboard. "Needs work, but the structure's solid. Could be a stunning event space, just like you wanted." Silas barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the second-floor balcony, where chipped paint curled like old promises. He wasn't sure what he was doing here. Yes, on paper, it was a business opportunity, a chance to restore a historic landmark, another box to check in his empire's steady expansion. But deep down, he knew the truth. He came back to Savannah for her, not to rekindle anything, he told himself, just to see, to understand why, after everything, her silence still echoed louder than any boardroom applause. She had disappeared after the divorce. No calls, no texts, not even a lawyer's follow-up. The gallery had gone quiet, her apartment emptied without a trace. She was gone, and he had let her go. Now, 6 years later, he found himself standing in the city they once dreamed of growing old in, staring at a house that, like them, had been beautiful once, and he felt haunted. A child's laugh cut through the morning air, sudden and bright. He turned instinctively, drawn to the sound. Across the street, just beyond the low garden wall of a small school, a group of children were spilling out onto the playground. Backpacks bouncing, laces untied, faces open and wild with joy. His eyes scanned them without thinking, just observing, until he saw her. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, with dark curls that danced around her face as she ran. She wore a lavender jacket and sparkly sneakers, and her smile, good God, that smile hit him like a truck. She looked up at someone behind her and shouted, "Mama, look!" Silas's heart stuttered, because walking just a few paces behind the girl was Marianne. Hair pulled back in a low bun, a lightweight sweater over a pale blue dress, and a canvas tote slung over one shoulder. She looked older, softer. There was something quiet in the way she moved, like the storm had passed, and she was now something stiller, steadier. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The little girl wrapped her arms around Marianne's waist, her laughter muffled as she buried her face into her mother's belly. And then Marianne looked up right across the street, right at him. For a moment, the world shrank. Just the two of them, staring through morning mist and years of silence. Her expression changed: shock, confusion, something else, and then she turned sharply, guiding the girl by the shoulders and heading toward a parked car at the curb. Silas stepped forward instinctively, hand lifting slightly as if to call out, but the car door slammed shut, and they were gone. He stood there, still staring at the empty street, while the project manager flipped another page and muttered something about permits. "Give me a minute," Silas said, his voice lower than usual. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, heart pounding against his ribs. She had a child. She had his eyes. He ran the math. 6 years since the divorce. The girl was no older than 6, no younger than 5. A spark lit in his gut, panic and clarity all at once. She didn't tell him. She never told him. He drove back to his hotel in a daze, his hands clenched on the steering wheel the whole ride. He couldn't stop seeing the girl's face, the way she tilted her head, the gap in her smile, the color of her eyes, his mother's eyes. The moment he reached his suite, he shut the door and sat down hard on the edge of the bed. He pulled out his phone and stared at her, contact the one he had never deleted. It was still just her name. No emoji, no last name, just Marianne. His thumb hovered over the screen, but he couldn't press the button. He couldn't call her. Not yet. He needed to be sure. By noon, he had a private investigator on the phone, a professional he trusted. Discreet, sharp. "I need to know everything," he said, pacing the length of the room. "Her name is Marianne Brooks. Lives here in Savannah. I need to know when she moved here, who she lives with, and if that little girl is—" He stopped. The words lodged in his throat. His. That night, sleep refused to come. The hotel felt too quiet, too clean. He stood by the window, watching the city shimmer beneath him, full of stories and noise and the ghosts of choices made in the dark. He remembered the way Marianne used to hum when she cooked, the way she danced barefoot in their kitchen, the way she cried quietly the night they lost the second round of IVF, not because he wasn't ready, but because he was already emotionally gone. He had become a man obsessed with building towers, but he never built anything that truly lasted. And maybe, just maybe, the one thing that could have mattered had been quietly growing up without him. The next morning, the PI called. "She moved back to Savannah 6 years ago," he said. "Lives in a modest neighborhood off Jones Street. Freelance graphic designer. She has a daughter. Name's Ellie. Birth certificate doesn't list a father." Silas sank into the armchair, numb. "Ellie?" he repeated. "Looks just like you." the PI added. Honestly, sir, it's pretty clear. Silas ended the call, phone shaking in his hand. He had a daughter he didn't know existed, a daughter who had smiled today without knowing he was watching. He stood slowly, the weight of the revelation almost too much to hold, and yet, beneath the grief, beneath the betrayal, there was something else, hope, a fragile thread, pulling him forward. Because no matter how much had been lost, one thing was clear. He wasn't done. Not with Marianne, and not with the little girl who had his eyes. Silas stood outside the weathered iron gate of 214 West Jones Street, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, watching the wind stir the ivy along the fence line. The house behind it was small and modest, painted a faded robin's egg blue, with flower boxes beneath the windows and a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. This was where she lived now, where they lived. A far cry from the penthouse view of Midtown Atlanta, but something about this place, its stillness, its softness, fit her in a way that all his luxury never had. He hadn't knocked yet. For 20 minutes, he had just stood there, hidden behind the wide oak out front, watching the porch like a man bracing for impact. Every time he lifted his hand to open the gate, his chest tightened, his throat dried. What was he supposed to say? Hi, Marianne. I saw you across the street and then hired someone to find out if you had my child. Even for him, that was too much. But she had kept this from him. A daughter, their daughter, and now, the silence between them felt less like heartbreak and more like a wound festering in the dark. The porch light clicked on. The front door opened. Marianne stepped outside, clutching a box of recyclables to her chest. She didn't see him right away. She walked to the bin by the fence, set the box down, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. She was wearing a simple gray sweatshirt, jeans, and rain boots. No makeup, no show. And she looked more beautiful than she ever had in those red carpet gowns he used to buy her. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Marianne. Her body jerked at the sound of his voice. She turned. For one fragile moment, she just stared, her breath caught, visibly. Her eyes locked onto his like a deer, sensing danger but unsure where to run. Silas? She breathed. He gave her a slow nod. I didn't know where else to go. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bin. How did you find me? I saw you, outside the school. His voice was calm, low. I saw her, Marianne. Silence. Rain started to sprinkle overhead, light as mist, clinging to the edges of their coats. Marianne's mouth opened, then closed again. She stepped back toward the porch without a word, the screen door creaking behind her. She didn't slam it. She didn't lock it. Silas followed, stopping at the foot of the steps. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. She turned toward him, eyes glassy. Because I didn't think you'd care. The words hit him harder than he expected. That's not fair, he said, his jaw tightening. Isn't it? Her voice cracked like dry wood. You stopped caring long before I walked out that door. You didn't even notice when I moved out, Silas. You didn't ask me why. I was drowning in work, trying to save everything we built. No, she said, stepping closer now. You were building something you wanted. Without me, without us. He looked down at the porch steps, his voice hollow. And the baby? I found out the morning of our divorce. Her breath hitched. I took the test in the bathroom of that cold conference room, and then I tore it up and walked out, because I knew if I told you then, it would be out of guilt or obligation, not love. Silas's throat tightened. She's mine, he said softly. Marianne nodded. Her name is Ellie. She's 5. She likes blueberries and pirate stories and sleeping with the closet light on. She's clever and kind and stubborn. He blinked quickly, his voice shaking. I missed everything. Yes, Marianne whispered, tears threatening. You did. They stood in silence again, the drizzle softening into a misty hush between them. I need to meet her, he said. I need to know her. You don't get to just show up and need, Silas. I'm not asking to rewrite the past, but she's mine too. You don't have the right to keep her from me. Her voice rose, just barely. And you didn't have the right to forget I existed. That landed. He swallowed hard. You said you saw me, she said after a moment. At the school. I did. And you followed me? I had to be sure. I didn't want to believe it until I saw it. She studied him. So what now? You play catch-up? Try to squeeze in visits between meetings and conference calls? I don't know, he said honestly, but I want to try. I want to make space for her, for you, if you'll let me. I'm not the same person you left behind. Neither am I. Marianne crossed her arms, holding herself. I need time, she said. He nodded. That's fair. She looked toward the window where a small nightlight glowed behind gauzy curtains. She doesn't know anything about you. Just that you live far away. That maybe someday is now, he said gently. Marianne's gaze softened just slightly. Not tonight, she whispered. She's asleep. I understand. A long pause. Then, unexpectedly, she added, Come by tomorrow, after school. We'll talk. Just me and you. Silas exhaled, some part of him releasing breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. Marianne opened the door. Before stepping inside, she looked at him once more. She looks just like you, you know. He nodded, heart full. I saw that. Then the door clicked shut, and Silas stood there alone on the porch of the life he'd never known he lost until now. And tomorrow, he would begin the impossible work of trying to earn it back. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and toast. Marianne moved through the small space in a soft daze, setting down Ellie's backpack by the door, pouring her a glass of milk, and placing a paper towel over the pancakes to keep them warm. Her hands knew the rhythm. But her mind was anywhere but there. It was barely 7:45, and her stomach was already tangled in a knot of nerves she couldn't swallow down. He was coming today. Silas. For the first time in over 6 years, he would walk through her door not as her husband, but as a stranger to the child who called her Mama every day. Mommy, you okay? Ellie's voice was small but sharp, cutting through her haze like sunlight through blinds. She stood in her purple pajamas, hair a soft cloud of curls, clutching her favorite plush dolphin, Finny, to her chest. Marianne forced a smile, crouching down to eye level. I'm just a little tired, baby, but I'm okay. You didn't sleep much. I heard you get up. I know, just thinking about a lot of things. Ellie tilted her head, serious. Is today a big day? Marianne blinked. Her daughter's intuition had always startled her. It might be. Ellie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Marianne's neck. Finny squished between them. You don't have to be scared. I'll protect you. The lump in Marianne's throat swelled so fast she had to hold her breath. She kissed the top of Ellie's head and whispered, You already do. By the time afternoon rolled around, the sun had pushed through the gray sky, casting a soft golden hue over the front yard. Marianne stood in the living room, rearranging throw pillows she'd already moved twice. The clock on the wall ticked far too loud. Each minute bled into the next like honey on a plate. She'd sent Ellie to Cora's for the evening. She needed time with Silas first, just them, to set boundaries. to feel this out before their daughter got caught in the unpredictable current of whatever was coming next. When the knock came, she froze. 3 slow knocks, not forceful, not impatient, just waiting. She opened the door. There he stood. Same broad shoulders, same clean lines of a designer coat, but there was something different in his face, less polished, more raw, like he wasn't there to prove anything, only to be. "Hi," he said softly. "Come in." He stepped across the threshold, and for a second, it felt like some invisible weight shifted in the room, like a chapter was about to turn, whether either of them was ready or not. They sat in the small dining nook, sunlight striping the table through the slatted blinds. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me come." Marianne folded her hands, gaze fixed on the wood grain. "I wasn't sure if I should. I wouldn't blame you if you hadn't." She looked up, eyes sharper now. "Then why are you here, Silas? Really?" He hesitated. "Because I missed too much already. I can't fix the past, but I can't pretend like I don't know anymore. I saw her. I saw you. And something in me just..." He paused, exhaled, snapped. Marianne nodded slowly. "She doesn't know about you." I figured. She knows there's a man who helped make her, but that he wasn't ready to be a father. Silas flinched, and I wasn't. "No, you weren't," she said, her voice catching. "But I was, even when I didn't think I could be." He looked at her, then really looked. "You've done a beautiful job with her." Her eyes welled despite her best effort. "She's everything. I believe it." A beat of silence. "I was drowning back then," he said. "In work, in ambition, in the fear of being ordinary. And I know that sounds pathetic, but it's the truth. I thought if I built something big enough, loud enough, I wouldn't feel how hollow everything else was." "You shut me out, Silas," she whispered. "I begged you to see me, and you didn't even blink." "I know. I left while you were still in the room, and you didn't even turn around." His shoulders dropped. "That's what keeps me up." She swallowed, breath shaky. "Why didn't you come after me?" "Because I thought letting you go was what you wanted." "Not what I wanted," she said, blinking back tears. "What I had to do." He nodded, slowly. "I see that now." She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "So where do we go from here?" Silas didn't answer right away. "I want to know her. I want to be in her life, but not to disrupt it. I'll go as slow as you need. I need the chance." Marianne studied him for a long moment, weighing every part of him against the man she once loved and the man now sitting across from her. "She's going to have questions," she said, "and I don't want her to feel like she was someone's secret." "She never was," he said. "Not to me. I just didn't know." Marianne nodded. "Then we tell her. Together." He exhaled, relief passing over his face like light through clouds. "Okay. But it has to be on her timeline, her terms." "Of course." Another pause. "Then Silas," she said, voice trembling, "don't show up unless you mean to stay." He looked at her, and this time, his eyes didn't drift. "I came back for a deal. I'm staying for her. For you, if you'll let me." Her breath caught. They sat in that quiet for a while, two people holding the fragile beginning of something new, layered over everything they used to be. And when he finally stood to leave, he didn't reach for her hand, but he looked back once more before opening the door. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said softly. "You don't have to open the door. Just let her know I came." Marianne nodded. After he left, she stood in the living room alone, the silence humming louder than ever, and in her chest, the smallest flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for what was lost, but for what might still be built. The morning light spilled gently through the sheer curtains, casting soft golden streaks across the hardwood floor. Marianne stood by the window, one hand curled around her coffee mug, the other resting lightly on the edge of the counter. The house was unusually quiet. Ellie had slept in, and for once, Marianne didn't wake her. She needed the extra rest. They both did. The weight of the previous day still hung in the air like the scent of yesterday's rain, clean, lingering, and impossible to ignore. She kept replaying Silas's words, "Don't show up unless you mean to stay." And his answer had come without hesitation. "I'm staying for her, for you, if you'll let me." She hadn't decided yet what that meant. But she knew one thing with certainty. The door was open, and once a door like that is cracked, the wind finds its way in. Ellie's bedroom door creaked open. Marianne turned as her daughter padded down the hallway, sleepy-eyed, her curls sticking out in all directions. "Morning, baby." Ellie yawned and crawled onto one of the kitchen stools. "Did you cry last night?" Marianne blinked, startled. "What makes you ask that?" "You had that look, the one after you watch a sad movie." Marianne smiled faintly. "Maybe a little. Grown-up feelings are complicated." Ellie tilted her head. "Was it about the man?" Marianne's breath caught. "What man?" "The one from the school. The one you looked at like he was from a dream." Marianne sat down beside her, her heart thudding in her ears. "You noticed that, huh?" "I notice everything." Ellie grinned, proud of herself. Marianne took a slow breath. "Do you remember I told you you had a daddy out there somewhere?" Ellie nodded. "Well," she hesitated, reaching for the right words. "That man is your daddy. His name is Silas." Ellie's brows drew together. "He's real?" "Yes. And he didn't know about you until just recently." "Why?" "Because I didn't tell him. I was scared. I wasn't sure if he'd be ready, and I wanted to protect you." Ellie chewed her lip, quiet. "Is he nice?" "He came to see us yesterday," Marianne said gently. "And he wants to meet you. Not today, not all at once, but soon." Ellie looked down at her dolphin plush toy, thinking. Then she asked, "Does he like blueberry pancakes?" Marianne smiled. "I think he might." Ellie nodded slowly. "Then he can come." Later that afternoon, Marianne stood nervously by the door, Ellie clinging to the edge of her skirt. The soft hum of a car engine outside made her pulse skip. She could feel her daughter's small hand tightening around her own. Then 3 knocks, just like yesterday. She opened the door. Silas stood there, a bouquet of tulips in one hand and a small, gift-wrapped book in the other. His eyes landed immediately on the little girl by her side. Ellie stared up at him, silent. He bent slowly to her level, not rushing, not overstepping. "Hi," he said softly. "You must be Ellie." She tilted her head, examining him like a scientist with a new discovery. "Are you my daddy?" His throat tightened. "Yes," he whispered. "I am." Ellie looked at the flowers. "Those for Mommy?" He smiled. "They are. And the book? That's for you. It was my favorite when I was your age." She looked at it cautiously. "Can I open it?" "Of course." She peeled back the paper carefully, revealing the velveteen rabbit. Her eyes lit up. "I know this one. My teacher read it last year." Silas looked at Marianne, his voice quiet. "It always reminded me of you." They moved inside, awkward at first, the energy delicate like walking across glass. Marianne offered coffee, but Silas declined. His focus was on Ellie, her every word, every glance, every question. They sat together in the living room, Ellie curled up in the corner of the couch, clutching the book. "Do you like stories?" she asked. "Very much," Silas said, "especially stories with happy endings." Ellie narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. "Sometimes the middle part is really sad." He nodded. "That's true, but sometimes the sad parts help us get to the better ones." She seemed to accept that. "Want to read it to me?" Silas looked at Marianne for permission. She gave a small nod, and so, with trembling hands, he opened the book and began. His voice stumbled at first, unused to this kind of softness, but as the words filled the room, something shifted. The pages turned. Ellie leaned in closer, and the lines between them, what had been and what could be, blurred just enough to let in light. After the story ended, Ellie looked up at him. "Do you have to leave now?" Silas hesitated. "Only if you want me to." She considered this. "You can stay a little longer, but next time, bring blueberry pancakes." He chuckled, eyes damp. "It's a deal." As evening painted the sky in strokes of pink and orange, Silas stood to leave. Ellie hugged him without being asked. He froze, overcome, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. Marianne watched from the hallway, unseen. When the door closed behind him, she walked into the living room. Ellie sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through the book again. "Mommy?" "Yes, baby?" "I think he's gonna be good." Marianne swallowed the lump in her throat. "I hope so," she said, and for the first time in years, she meant it. The wind rolled softly through Savannah's historic district, sweeping amber leaves across the sidewalk as Marianne glanced at her watch again. Silas was late, not terribly, but late enough to stir something in her chest. That nervous flutter she hadn't felt in years, the kind that came when something mattered too much. He was supposed to pick Ellie up from school for their first solo afternoon together. Just 2 hours. A walk by the river, ice cream, maybe a stop at the little bookstore Ellie loved. It was a trial run, a test, for both of them. Ellie had been buzzing since morning. "I told Clara my daddy's coming today," she'd whispered during breakfast, pride soft and wide in her voice. "I said he reads stories really good." Marianne had smiled, hiding the twist in her gut. She wanted this for Ellie. But each step closer Silas came, the more real this all became, and the more real it became, the more pieces of herself she felt exposed. Her phone buzzed. "Silas. Parking now. 2 blocks away. I'll be there in 5. She exhaled, releasing the breath she hadn't noticed she'd been holding. 5 minutes. Just 5 more. The bell above the school gate chimed as the children began pouring out, backpacks jostling, shoes scuffing the cement. Ellie appeared last, holding hands with her teacher, Miss Ramirez. Marianne waved. Ellie's eyes scanned quickly until they found her mother. But her steps slowed. Her grip on Miss Ramirez's hand tightened. Marianne furrowed her brow. Ellie stopped, looked behind her, and then brightened. Silas was approaching from the side street, holding a small brown paper bag. His tie was loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder, hair just slightly windblown like he'd run part of the way. He spotted Ellie and slowed, careful not to overwhelm. "Hey, sunshine," he said, crouching to meet her eyes. Ellie let go of her teacher's hand and walked toward him, hesitant but smiling. "You came," she said, as if she still wasn't sure he would. "I wouldn't miss it." He opened the paper bag. Surprise inside. Ellie peeked in. "Are those blueberry muffins? The bakery on Jones Street said they're the best in town. You'll have to confirm." She giggled, then held out her hand. "Come on, the river walks this way." He looked at Marianne, a silent check-in. She nodded, her voice barely audible. 2 hours. We'll be back by 5. She watched them go, father and daughter, side by side, the gap between them just a little smaller. Back at home, the quiet felt heavier than usual. Marianne cleaned the kitchen even though it was already spotless, rearranged books she'd already alphabetized, poured herself coffee and forgot to drink it. When the front door opened at 4:57, she was already standing in the hallway. Ellie barreled in, cheeks flushed, eyes shining. "Mommy, we saw a boat with a dog on it. And Daddy let me throw a coin in the fountain and make a wish." Marianne smiled. "Did you tell him your wish?" "Nope," Ellie said proudly. "Then it won't come true." Silas followed her inside, holding the paper bag now crumpled and stained with butter. She ate 2 muffins and somehow still wanted ice cream. I caved. Marianne crossed her arms. "You'll learn she's very persuasive." "I already have." His eyes lingered on hers for a moment too long. Ellie skipped to her room, humming under her breath, leaving them in a quiet that felt anything but empty. "She's amazing," Silas said. "I know. I mean it, Marianne. She's God. She's everything. And I can't believe I've missed this much." "You can't get it back," she said quietly. "I know." He took a slow step toward her. "But maybe I can still build something new." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked past him into the kitchen and busied herself with putting on the kettle. The air between them shifted, tightened. He followed. She asked if I was staying forever. Marianne stilled. "What did you say?" I told her I'm not sure what forever looks like, but I'm not going anywhere unless you both ask me to. She looked up then, eyes narrowed. "That's a big promise." "I meant it." "You meant a lot of things once, Silas." He didn't flinch. "I did, and I failed you. I know that." Marianne set the kettle down with a clink. "You didn't just fail me. You abandoned the version of yourself I believed in. I didn't know who I was without the noise, without the deals, the headlines, the next big thing. And now?" He stepped closer. "Now I know the biggest thing I ever had was already in my hands, and I let it slip through." She swallowed hard. "Do you expect me to just open the door and pretend none of it happened?" "No," he said gently, "but maybe just crack it open, enough to let me knock again." Marianne looked away, blinking fast. "Ellie deserves the truth," she said, "and she deserves someone who'll show up without being asked." "I'm here," he said, voice softer now. "And I'm not leaving, not unless you tell me to." The kettle began to whistle, sharp and shrill. She turned the burner off. Neither of them spoke. "Then you should go," she said, not meeting his eyes. Silas nodded, slowly. "Okay." He moved to the door, hand on the knob. "Silas." He stopped. "Thursday," she said, voice low. "Ellie has a parent breakfast at school. If you want to come." "A beat. I'll be there." The door clicked shut behind him. Marianne stood alone in the kitchen, kettle still warm, heart burning. This wasn't forgiveness, but it might have been the first step towards something like it. The sun rose slowly over Savannah, casting honey-colored light through the lace curtains in Marianne's kitchen. She stood by the sink, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, eyes fixed on the backyard where Ellie had left her scooter leaning against the fence. The morning was quiet, unusually so, but her mind buzzed with what today held. Parent breakfast. It was such a small thing on paper, some coffee, muffins, kids showing off their crayon art. But for Silas, for Ellie, for herself, it felt like a line in the sand. He was coming. For the first time, he would be in Ellie's school as her father, sitting beside her, stepping into a space that had never included him before. Marianne glanced at the clock. 7:03. He said he'd meet them there by 7:30. She didn't doubt he would. Ellie bounded into the kitchen, hair half tamed and face already sticky from trying to sneak syrup. "Is he gonna be there?" she asked, licking her fingers. Marianne nodded, managing a smile. "Yes, he is. Do you think he'll like my painting?" "I think he'll love it," Ellie beamed. "I made it with glitter, and glue, and more glitter." "That's your signature," Marianne said with a smirk. By the time they pulled into the small parking lot at the school, the lawn was already dotted with families, dads in button-ups balancing coffee cups, moms wrangling toddlers and backpacks. A folding table was set up beneath the old oak tree with breakfast pastries and juice boxes. Ellie tugged at Marianne's hand as they walked toward the classroom. "What if he gets lost?" "He won't," Marianne reassured, but her own pulse ticked up a notch. Then, just as they turned the corner, Silas appeared at the end of the hallway, holding a paper cup and looking slightly out of place in his tailored blazer and unbuttoned collar. He spotted them instantly. "There you are," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. Ellie ran to him, unafraid now. "You're not late." "I promised, didn't I?" He held out his free hand, and she grabbed it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Marianne walked slower, taking in the scene she never thought she'd see. Her daughter, smiling up at her father like she'd known him all her life. Silas so present it almost hurt to look at him. Inside the classroom, Ellie led them to her desk, proudly pointing out her glitter-drenched painting of a family of 3 standing under a tree with blue hearts floating overhead. Silas crouched beside her. "Is that us?" "Yep," Ellie said. "That's you with the long arms 'cause you're tall, and Mommy with the curly hair, and me with the sparkles." He looked at it for a long time. "It's perfect." Marianne turned away, pretending to read the welcome sign on the board, trying to swallow the burn rising in her throat. A moment later, she felt a presence beside her. Silas leaned in just slightly. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just adjusting." He glanced around the room. "I don't know how you've done this alone." "I didn't have a choice." He looked at her, serious now. "I'm not asking for credit. I'm asking how to help from here." Her eyes met his, sharp but softening. "Don't disappear." "I won't." They fell into silence again as Ellie pulled him toward the snack table, explaining which muffins were too dry and which had the best blueberry clusters. A woman approached from behind, tall, mid-50s, stylishly dressed with a warm smile. "Marianne, it's Cora, Ellie's art teacher. We met last spring?" "Oh, yes, hi." Marianne forced a smile. "I just had to tell you. Ellie's been talking about her father non-stop this week. She said he has a voice that makes books sound better." Marianne's throat tightened. "She did?" She's so proud, like something clicked into place for her. Marianne glanced across the room where Silas crouched beside Ellie again, listening intently to her every word. Cora followed her gaze. "You okay?" Marianne nodded. "I don't know. It's just a lot. It always is when the heart's involved," Cora said gently. "But she's not the only one who needed this. I can see it in your face." A long silence. Then, softly, Marianne whispered, "I didn't expect it to feel like this." "Like what?" "Like maybe it's not too late." The school event wound down an hour later. Parents filtered out with kids in tow, a few waving goodbyes over their shoulders. Silas stood by the car, Ellie bouncing beside him. Marianne joined them, keys in hand. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. Silas nodded. "Thanks for letting me." Ellie looked between them. "Can Daddy come over for dinner?" Marianne hesitated. eyes flicking to Silas. "If it's okay," he said gently. She studied him. The way he looked at Ellie, the way his shoulders had softened since that first knock on her door. Thursday, spaghetti night. Ellie cheered, throwing her arms around his waist. Silas smiled, looking at Marianne like it meant everything. And maybe, just maybe, it did. Thursday arrived with the scent of rosemary and garlic drifting through the house. Marianne stood at the stove, stirring the simmering marinara, trying to focus on each swirl of the spoon instead of the noise in her chest. Ellie was at the table, hunched over a coloring book, tongue poking out in concentration. Every few minutes, she'd look at the front door like she expected it to swing open early. "Is he gonna be here soon?" she asked, again. Marianne smiled tightly. He said 6. "It's only 5:30. Ellie sighed, tapping her crayon like a drumstick. "He's probably picking out dessert. He said he'd bring something sweet." Marianne raised her brows. "Did he now?" "He said it's a surprise, but I hope it's the lemon pie like last time. I'm sure whatever it is, it'll be special." She turned back to the stove, adjusting the heat. Her hands were steady, but her mind was anything but. This dinner, it wasn't just dinner. It was a new space for the three of them, one that hadn't existed before. It felt fragile, like glass set on the edge of a counter. At exactly 5:57, the doorbell rang. Ellie was already sprinting to the door, socks skidding on the hardwood. "Wait, slow down, sweetheart," Marianne called, drying her hands, but Ellie had already yanked the door open. Silas stood there with a white bakery box in one hand and a bunch of yellow tulips in the other. "Hi, sunshine," Ellie gasped. "Lemon pie," Silas grinned. "You have a good memory." Marianne stepped in, wiping her palms on a dish towel. Her eyes went to the flowers, then back to him. "Is this going to become a habit?" He held the tulips out to her. "Only if I'm lucky enough to keep being invited." She accepted them with a soft smile, trying not to let it linger too long. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The three of them settled into a rhythm surprisingly quickly. Ellie chattered between bites, telling Silas about her spelling test and how she thought the boy who sat next to her might be cheating. "I caught him peeking," she whispered dramatically, "but I didn't tell." Silas leaned in, eyes twinkling. "You're a vault of secrets." "I know everything," Ellie declared proudly, "even Mommy's coffee order." "Do you?" he asked, raising a brow. "Decaf with oat milk, no sugar." Marianne laughed. "Well, now the whole world knows." Silas's eyes softened. "I like hearing about your world." Dinner stretched into dessert, and soon they were sitting in the living room, the last crumbs of lemon pie on their plates. Ellie climbed up between them, pulling out her favorite blanket. "Can we watch a movie?" she asked. "Not too late," Marianne warned, but nodded. "Just one." Silas looked at Ellie. "Your pick." She grinned and scurried off to grab the remote. As the credits rolled 45 minutes later, Ellie was fast asleep, head on Silas's shoulder, blanket tangled around her legs. Marianne moved to lift her, but Silas shook his head gently. "Let me." He scooped Ellie up with surprising ease, careful not to wake her. Marianne led the way to the bedroom, pulling the covers back. Silas laid her down, brushing a curl from her forehead before stepping back with reverence. They both stood there for a moment, staring at her, this little miracle who had changed everything. In the hallway, the air felt heavier. Still, Silas looked at her, voice low. "I've missed so many nights like this." Marianne didn't respond. "I know I can't rewrite the past," he said, voice quiet. "But I want to be here now, not just for Ellie. For you, too." Her jaw tensed. "Don't say things just because it feels good in the moment." "I'm not." You don't know who I am anymore, Silas. I've changed. I can see that, he said softly. You're stronger now, calmer, more certain. And you? He took a step closer, trying to be less selfish, more honest. She folded her arms. You were always good at giving just enough of yourself to look generous, but never enough to stay. He looked down. I deserve that, and I deserve more than an apology, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I need proof. I need consistency. He met her eyes. Then I'll keep showing up. A long silence stretched between them. I'm not asking you to fall back into something that broke you, he said. I'm asking if we can start something different. From now. From truth. Marianne looked at him, tears prickling her eyes before she could blink them away. You showing up doesn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep. The mornings I woke up terrified I wasn't enough for her. I know, he said, stepping forward slowly. But maybe, if you let me, I can be part of the healing, not the hurt. She didn't answer right away. Then softly, she said, We'll see. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Silas nodded, accepting it like a vow. Good night, Marianne. Good night, Silas. He turned to go, glancing once more at the hallway behind her where Ellie lay dreaming, unaware of how close her family had just come to something they never thought they'd have again. Marianne stood in the doorway long after he left, staring into the quiet, wondering if sometimes the scariest thing wasn't letting someone go. It was letting them back in. The gallery was quiet except for the soft hum of jazz playing through hidden speakers and the rhythmic taps of Marianne's heels across the polished floor. Framed canvases lined the walls, each one a swirl of color and silence. This was her space, her sanctuary, and yet today, she couldn't settle. She stood in front of a piece Ellie had made last week, watercolor suns with crooked smiles and 3 stick figures holding hands beneath them. One had Silas's tie, another had Marianne's hair, the third was Ellie, all glitter and heart stickers. Marianne stared at it, her arms crossed, jaw tight. He was showing up, consistently, for Ellie. For her, that part was trickier. He said all the right things, wore remorse like a tailored suit, and offered her the kind of patience she used to beg for. But it felt fragile, like if she breathed too deeply, the truth would crack wide open. Her phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. Need you at the boutique, small emergency, please come. Also, I made scones. Marianne smirked despite herself. She grabbed her bag and keys, sending one last glance at Ellie's painting before stepping into the afternoon light. The boutique was only a few blocks away, tucked between a florist and a bookstore. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Rebecca stood by the dressing room curtain, arms folded, scowling at a mannequin. This dress is cursed, she said, nodding toward a flowing blue gown. Everyone who tries it on either sneezes uncontrollably or gets dumped. It's a vortex of emotional sabotage. Marianne laughed. That's your emergency? No, but I needed backup, emotionally. And also, I may have invited someone to coffee with us. Marianne froze. Rebecca, he texted me, Mare, asking if you were okay. Said he didn't want to pressure you, just wanted to make sure you weren't retreating. Marianne looked away, throat tightening. He's trying, Rebecca added gently. I know, that's the problem. They didn't say much after that. A few minutes later, the bell above the door jingled and Silas stepped inside, holding 2 coffees and looking like someone who didn't know whether to smile or brace for impact. Hi, he said, offering her one of the cups. She took it, Thanks. Rebecca tactfully disappeared into the back. Silas nodded toward the fitting area. That blue dress is still here? It haunts the walls, Marianne said, sipping her drink. He chuckled softly. It was in the window the day I found out where you were. She glanced at him. You remember that? I remember everything. Even the little things, especially those. A pause. Then he added, That's why I came today. She looked up, suddenly alert. I had a meeting this morning, he said, in Atlanta, my old firm. Marianne's breath caught. They want me back, he continued. Offered a new position, bigger than the last, twice the money. Her chest tightened, and I said no. The room tilted, just slightly. Why? She whispered. Because I'm not building someone else's empire anymore, he said, voice firm. I want to build a life, here, with you and Ellie, and if that means smaller deals, less recognition, I'll take it. She stepped back, wary. Silas, don't do this for show. Don't perform the version of you I wanted and expect that to be enough. I'm not performing, he said, his tone raw now. I'm choosing, and I want to know if there's space in your life for that choice. Her heart pounded. But before she could answer, the boutique door chimed again. Angela walked in. Marianne froze. Angela tall, poised, eyes like storm clouds. Silas's business partner, once rumored to be more. She spotted them instantly, a small, tight smile forming. Didn't expect to run into you two here, she said, walking over with measured grace. Silas looked stunned. Angela, what are you doing in Savannah? I'm in town for a property review, she replied, her gaze flicking to Marianne. Small world. Silas cleared his throat. We're catching up. I can see that. Angela's tone was smooth, unreadable. You were missed at the board meeting this morning. Marianne's stomach dropped. Silas looked from Angela to Marianne. I didn't tell her. Angela arched a brow. Tell me what? I'm not coming back, he said, flatly. Angela blinked. You're joking. I'm not. She looked at Marianne again, and this time, something flickered behind her expression. I hope it's worth it, Angela said quietly. Then she turned and walked out. The silence she left behind was suffocating. Marianne stared at him. You didn't tell her. I wanted to tell you first. Why? Because your opinion matters more. She shook her head. This just got messier. I can fix it. No, she said, stepping back, voice barely steady. You don't get to fix it. You keep showing up with perfect words and perfect timing and She broke off, biting her lip to keep it from trembling. I need space, Silas, she whispered. Real space. He didn't argue, didn't reach for her, just nodded. Okay. Then he left, quietly, and Marianne sat down, the cold coffee still in her hand, wondering how something so close to love could still feel like loss. The days that followed unfolded like slow rain, not loud, not destructive, just constant. Marianne buried herself in her gallery work, in laundry, in planning the spring art camp for local kids. Anything to keep her hands moving and her mind distracted. But Silas lingered everywhere, in the smallest things. A forgotten coffee spoon in the sink, the sound of jazz playing low on her car radio, Ellie humming a tune he'd taught her while brushing her doll's hair. At first, she'd told herself space would bring clarity. It didn't. It brought ache, a deep one that pulled at the edges of her confidence. She still hadn't told Ellie they were taking a pause. It didn't feel like a breakup. There was nothing official to break, but the air had shifted. One night, while tucking Ellie into bed, her daughter turned to her suddenly. "Why hasn't Daddy been here for dinner?" Marianne froze. "He's just giving me some time," she said carefully. "Did he do something bad?" "No, baby. Did you?" The question struck her in the chest. "No," she said quietly. "Sometimes grown-ups just need time to figure things out. It's not about who did something wrong." Ellie frowned, clearly unsatisfied. "But he was making us pancakes. He even bought the real syrup." "I know." The room fell quiet. Ellie rolled onto her side, wrapping her arms around her stuffed elephant. "I miss him." Marianne brushed a curl from her cheek. "I know, sweetheart." She lingered there a little longer that night, watching her daughter sleep, and as she did, the questions she'd been avoiding rose to the surface. What was she waiting for? A guarantee? A version of love that didn't include risk? Because love was never a contract. It was a choice made daily, and Silas had been choosing them, over and over. Her walls had been built high, and maybe they had needed to be. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to lower them. The next morning, she drove to the old garden center on the edge of town. The place Silas had taken Ellie to pick tulips. The one he said reminded him of the farm his grandmother used to keep. She wandered past rows of petunias and peonies, finally stopping in front of a flat of rosemary plants. Her fingers brushed the leaves, earthy, strong, stubborn. Like her. A familiar voice spoke behind her. "I didn't think I'd see you here." Marianne turned. Silas stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes surprised but not guarded. There was no pretense in his expression, just hope and maybe a bit of fear. "I didn't come looking for you," she said. "I know. But I'm glad you're here." He gave a small nod, stepping closer. "Me too." For a moment, they stood among the plants and the soft rustle of morning wind, saying nothing. Finally, she asked, "How did the firm take it? You turning them down?" They were stunned, then insulted, then relieved. She raised a brow. "They know I wouldn't have stayed." "Not really. I left once in body. Now I had to leave in heart." Marianne studied him. "And what do you want to build now?" His voice softened, something honest, slow, rooted. She looked down at the rosemary in her hands. "I want to rebuild trust, Marianne, not just with Ellie, with you." She sighed, setting the plant back on the shelf. "That's not a one-time fix." "I know, and I don't know what this is yet, what it could be, or if it's salvageable." "Let me show you," he said gently. "Let me prove it. Not with words, but time." Her eyes welled despite herself. "I'm scared, Silas." "I am too," he admitted. "But I'm more scared of not trying." She stepped back, biting her lip. "I'm not promising anything." "I'm not asking for a promise," he said. "I'm asking for a chance." Marianne took a breath. Deep, full. "Start small," she said. "Dinner. Just the three of us. No pressure." His eyes lit up, but he didn't push it. "Tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached all the way to her bones. She turned to leave, heart hammering with something that felt almost like courage, but before she walked away, she looked back at him and said, "And bring the real syrup." Silas laughed. Already bought it, and in that moment, under the haze of early morning sun and rosemary-scented air, something shifted again. Not sharp or dramatic this time, but soft and slow, like spring creeping back after a long, uncertain winter. The smell of syrup and cinnamon filled the kitchen before the sun even touched the windows. Marianne stood barefoot on the tiled floor, flipping pancakes while Ellie chattered away at the table, brushing syrup on her toast like it was a watercolor project. Silas had arrived early, earlier than expected. With real Vermont maple syrup, fresh strawberries, and a bouquet of daffodils, he said, looked like a Tuesday morning should. He moved around the kitchen like he used to, but slower this time. Less assumption, more intention. "I didn't know you were such a pancake expert," Marianne said, half teasing. Silas grinned. "I had a good teacher, and a 5-year-old consultant who demands top quality." Ellie giggled. "He burnt one last time." Silas raised his hands in mock surrender. "Chef's error. I've grown since then." The lightness in the room didn't feel forced, it felt real, and that scared Marianne more than silence ever did. After breakfast, Ellie ran off to the sunroom, tugging a bag of crayons and paper behind her. Silas watched her go. "She's getting taller, looks more like you every day. She has your eyes," Marianne said without thinking. Then she caught herself, cleared her throat. "You should see her drawings lately. She's been obsessed with gardens." "Yeah? She keeps drawing these cottages with winding stone paths and flower beds. Says she wants a house like that when she grows up." Silas looked at her carefully. "Maybe someday we build her one." Her chest tightened. He meant well, but those kind of visions still felt too big, too heavy. She stood and started clearing the dishes. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm not rushing you," he said softly. "But I am serious." She nodded, saying nothing. As Silas rinsed the plates, he glanced out the window. "Rebecca invited me to the community art show this Friday." Marianne looked up. "She did?" He nodded. "Said Ellie might be displaying something. She's been working on a big piece for weeks. Won't even let me peek." Silas smiled. "She asked if I'd come. And? I told her only if it was okay with her mom." Marianne studied him. He didn't say it to score points. He said it because he meant it. "Yeah," she said. "It's okay." He smiled just a little, but it said everything. Later that night, long after the dishes were put away and Ellie had fallen asleep with crayon smudges on her cheeks, Marianne sat in bed scrolling through old photos on her phone. One from their wedding popped up, him in a navy tux, her in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. They looked happy. Were they? Back then, maybe, before the deals got bigger and his flights got longer. Before the silence crept in between them like fog, she set the phone down and closed her eyes. She didn't hear the text come in until the screen lit up beside her. From Silas. "I know I can't erase the past, Marianne, but I'd give anything to be part of your future." She stared at the message for a long moment. Typed, deleted, typed again. "Marianne, one step at a time, but you're walking in the right direction." She hit send, then laid back, heart thudding, unsure if what she'd just opened was a door or a window. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like she was standing alone on the other side. The backyard was alive with spring light, soft and golden, spilling through the branches of the old dogwood tree that Marianne had planted years ago, long before she imagined Silas would ever return to this part of her life. Ellie ran barefoot across the grass, holding a small watering can and humming to herself, a trail of giggles and splashes following her. Marianne leaned against the porch railing, watching her daughter. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of tea, though she hadn't taken a sip in minutes. The air was thick with anticipation, and she felt it pressing against her chest like the quiet before a storm. Silas stood near the dogwood, crouched beside a small wooden planter box he'd built with Ellie the day before. His sleeves were rolled up, and there was a faint smear of soil on his collar, a small mark of effort that made Marianne's heart skip. She's done watering everything, Silas said, straightening and brushing his hands together. I think we're ready for the next step. Ellie ran over, cheeks flushed. Mommy, Mommy, he said, we're planting something special today. Her eyes shone with excitement. What is it? Marianne smiled softly. You'll see, baby. Silas looked at her then, a question in his gaze that wasn't about the plants. You ready? Marianne nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, I think I am. Together, they knelt beside the planter, digging gently into the rich soil. Marianne held the small tree steady while Silas positioned it, his hands brushing against hers as they worked in quiet tandem. The moment was intimate in a way neither of them had experienced in years. No words were needed, only the shared breath, the soft scrape of roots against dirt, and the laughter of a child who was finally whole in the presence of both her parents. Ellie clapped her hands. It's perfect. She leaned against Silas, resting her head on his shoulder. Just like you said it would be. Silas glanced down at her, his green eyes soft. It's because of you, kiddo. Marianne watched the two of them, something stirring deep inside her chest. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the space that had opened between her and Silas, to feel that connection again. But fear lingered, a reminder of the years lost and the walls she had built to protect herself. Silas caught her gaze and didn't look away. Mare. His voice was low, tentative, full of the kind of vulnerability that made her pulse quicken. I know I don't get to ask for anything. Not after the years I let slip by. But, he swallowed, I want to try, for us, for Ellie. I don't want to just show up, I want to stay. Marianne's hands trembled slightly. You've said that before, she murmured. But words aren't enough. I know. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I won't just say it again. I'll show you, starting now, every day. Her chest tightened. Every instinct in her told her to step back, to guard herself. But there was something undeniable, magnetic, in the way he looked at her. Something that reached past caution and fear, touching the part of her that had always believed in second chances. Ellie tugged at Silas's sleeve. Daddy, can we do the watering together now? He smiled down at her. Of course, princess. As they moved together, Marianne stayed behind for a moment, letting herself breathe, letting herself feel the scent of soil, the warmth of sunlight, the sight of her family in this small, fragile moment. It was more than she had dared hope for. And yet, the questions remained, sharp and insistent. Could she truly trust him again? Could she let herself open her heart fully after so many years of absence and silence? Silas approached, sensing her hesitation. He knelt beside her, his eyes steady. I'm not asking you to decide everything today, he said softly. I just want you to see me, to see that I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Marianne's voice caught. It's just, I've been hurt before. I've learned to survive without you. I know, he whispered. And I don't expect you to forget. I just want to be here, in whatever way you'll let me. For a long moment, she studied his face, memorizing the lines of his expression, the way the light caught his eyes, and finally, she nodded, barely. Okay, you can start here. Silas smiled, the relief soft and quiet. That's all I need for now. They spent the next hour tending the small tree, Ellie laughing and squealing as water splashed over her boots, Silas patiently teaching her how to hold the hose just right. Marianne joined in, feeling the tension in her chest ease, replaced by something fragile and tentative hope. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, Silas leaned closer to Marianne, his hand brushing against hers once more. "Mare." His voice was low, urgent. "I know I can't promise perfection, but I can promise this: I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes filled with tears, and for once, they weren't tears of fear or regret. They were tears of something harder earned, something real. She whispered back, her voice barely audible over the hum of the evening, "Then I'll try. With you. For Ellie." He nodded, a soft, tender smile crossing his face. "That's all I could ever ask." Ellie ran over, hands covered in mud and glittering water droplets. "Can we name it now? The tree?" Silas and Marianne exchanged a glance. She shrugged, laughing softly. "Why not?" Ellie's eyes lit up. "Sunshine Tree," she declared, "because it's happy and bright, like today." Silas laughed, scooping her into his arms. "Sunshine Tree it is." Marianne stepped back, watching them, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future entwined in this small, perfect moment. And as the evening sky deepened into shades of pink and gold, she realized something she hadn't dared admit for years. Sometimes, love didn't come back loud or dramatic. Sometimes it came quietly, slowly, with roots deep enough to hold even the heaviest storms. And maybe, just maybe, this time, it would stay. The garden was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that felt sacred, as if the world had held its breath for them. Marianne stood barefoot on the damp grass, Ellie by her side, tugging at her mother's hand to point out the first tiny green leaves pushing through the soil in the Sunshine Tree planter. The delicate shoots quivered under the morning breeze, sunlight glinting off the droplets of dew that clung to them. Marianne smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, letting herself breathe fully for the first time in years. Behind her, footsteps approached. Silas. He moved with deliberate slowness, as if approaching the fragile balance they had found. He carried a small pot of lavender, rich in color and scent, and placed it beside the new shoots. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," Marianne replied, her voice quiet but steady. Ellie ran forward, giggling. "Daddy, look! The tree's leaves are awake." Silas crouched, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I see them, Sunshine. Just like us, huh? Little things growing, little things learning to stretch toward the light." Marianne felt her throat tighten. The metaphor was almost too perfect. She took a careful step closer. "We've come a long way." "Yes," Silas admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "And I'm not going anywhere now. Not ever again. I can't erase the past, Marianne, but I can stand here with you and make sure we build something better, something real." Ellie tugged at Silas's hand. "Can we plant the lavender together?" He smiled and held out his hands. "Let's do it." As they knelt in the soft earth, hands brushing against soil and petals, Marianne watched them, and the tight coil of fear in her chest began to loosen. Every small movement, Ellie laughing as she spilled a little dirt, Silas encouraging her to dig carefully, felt like a stitch sewing together the frayed edges of their lives. Once the lavender was planted, Silas stood and extended his hand toward Marianne. "Dance with me?" he asked, a playful light in his eyes. She hesitated. Memories of past failures, broken promises, and long nights alone threatened to hold her back. But then she glanced at Ellie, whose small hands clutched a plush dolphin, and saw the trust in her eyes. This wasn't just about her and Silas anymore, it was about the family they were finally allowed to be. Marianne placed her hand in his. He pulled her close, and for a moment, it was as if the years of distance and silence melted away. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath her ear, and allowed herself to let go. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "I know," he whispered. "I'm scared too, but we can be scared together." She laughed lightly, the sound fragile but genuine. "That feels like hope." "Exactly," he said, tightening his hold just slightly. "Hope is enough for now. And eventually, it becomes everything." Ellie ran between them, twirling in circles, her giggles carrying across the garden like a song. "You guys make a good team." Silas bent down, picking her up. "We're the best team," he agreed, holding her securely. The morning faded into afternoon, sunlight warming their skin as they moved through the garden together. They planted more flowers, roses, daisies, tiny herbs, and even Ellie carefully placed a small stone by the base of the sunshine tree, declaring it a guardian rock. As they paused to admire their work, Silas turned to Marianne. "You know, I used to think being a millionaire meant having everything. I had houses, cars, vacations, but I was empty inside." Marianne's gaze softened. "You weren't empty. You just forgot how to feel." "I did," he admitted. "But now I know that wealth isn't what matters. It's these moments. It's this family." He gestured toward Ellie, then the small garden around them. "This is everything I ever wanted, and I don't plan to lose it again." Marianne felt tears prick her eyes. "We'll grow together," she said softly, slowly, carefully. "We won't rush it, but we'll grow." Silas nodded, brushing her hair from her face. "I like the sound of that." Ellie tugged at Marianne's sleeve. "Mommy, can we make a picnic now?" "Of course," Marianne said, smiling, and she looked at Silas. "Together?" "Together," he confirmed, as they spread a blanket under the shade of the dogwood, sharing sandwiches, lemonade, and laughter. The past felt distant, not forgotten, but transformed. Every tear, every moment of pain had led them here to a space filled with trust, forgiveness, and the quiet, steady heartbeat of family. Later, when the sky turned gold and then soft pink, Marianne watched Silas scoop Ellie onto his shoulders as they played tag around the yard. She felt a hand slip into hers. He didn't need to speak. She understood. They had come through storms and silence, distance and doubt. And now, standing together with their daughter running between them, Marianne finally believed it could last. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but real, true, and worth every scar and every tear. She glanced at Silas, his eyes warm and steady, and whispered, "We made it." "We did," he said, brushing a kiss over her temple. Ellie ran up again, arms outstretched, shouting, "I love you both." Marianne knelt, hugging her tightly, Silas joining in. For the first time in years, she felt the fullness of home, of family, of love that had weathered absence and grown stronger. The sunshine tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, leaves brushing against each other like a soft promise, and Marianne knew, without doubt, that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings. That love, when chosen carefully and nurtured with patience, could bloom brighter than even the darkest past allowed. And in that golden light, with Silas by her side and Ellie nestled between them, she whispered a quiet vow to herself, to them, and to the future. No more hiding, no more silence, only growth, love, and the courage to keep showing up.